Hey Ron, what show are we doing today?
I'm doing the War Vault.
The what vault?
The War Vault.
The what?
The War Vault.
Can you say it normal?
The War Vault.
Oh.
This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy and Squarespace.
Hey, welcome to iFanboy, the comic book discussion show from the website iFanboy.com. I don't know why I like to pause there.
Sorry.
It's dramatic. It's a pregnant pause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's not use that word. I'm Josh Flanagan.
I'm Ron Richards.
I'm Conor Kilpatrick, and every so often we like to gather our trade paperbacks into a big stack.
And just look at them.
We look and admire, and then we pick one out to talk about on the show. Each of us pick one. Often there's a theme.
Sometimes
What's
there's
the
a
theme today?
The War.
War.
The War.
War Vault.
War. What is it? Oh, yeah, I got that.
We're gonna have that played
Okay,
in
the
a
music
loop.
rights.
What is it?
So we thought
Say it again.
We thought we've done a
Absolutely
we've done
not.
we've done a war comics show in the past a long time ago. There have been new books that we've read since then we wanted to talk about. So we're doing a War Vault today.
And now this is interesting because this is war comics. That's a genre you both enjoy quite a bit.
Let's tell a real quick story from Ron. When we were preparing the show via email, and I'm finding out what everybody's books are, and Ron goes, "Can I do Sinestro Corps War?"
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing
You really
with
asked
here.
that?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
Yeah. So I said, no, actual war.
I said it's got to be realistic war. It can't be fake war. It can't
Infinity
Oh no!
War.
I also said, what about Operation Galactic Storm?
Yes.
Which would have been awesome.
If there was a trade of that
War
might
of
have been
Kings? Asgardian War.
That's recent.
Infinity War?
But yeah, so we're doing the war stuff. So that's not a genre I really read. So I went out and I actually did my homework. And after reading Wednesday comics that came out last year and reading Joe Kubert's awesome Sergeant Rock story, I wanted to go back and get something like that. And so I picked up the graphic novel that came out that was written by Brian Azzarello that he worked on, Sergeant Rock, Between Hell and a Hard Place. And now I'm not prepared because I don't have the book with me and I forgot it. I'm sorry.
Tick.
Yes, but it came out an original graphic novel. Now, Joe Kubert, you know the name Kuberts because you know his sons Adam and Andy Kubert are
They run an institute,
well,
something like that.
aside from that,
Every now and then they draw a comic.
every now and then Adam and Andy Kubert, they used to draw a lot for Marvel, but then they went to DC and they just do covers now. But although one of them is back at Marvel, but anyway, their dad Joe Kubert is one of those pillar of the comic industry. Worked in the 60s and 70s and the Silver Age and in the 50s even too. For DC and did some great work. He opened a school up in New Jersey. A lot of the people you're reading comics today went to the school. I know Amanda Connor went, and a whole bunch of the ads are in the comics. You can see them.
Charlie from Indie Spinner Rack.
Yeah. But so, wow.
It's the only other alum I could think
Now,
of.
Joe Kubert, though, he did a lot of work with these war comics for DC Comics in the 60s. And in fact, in the foreword of the Sergeant Rock book, he writes about his experience. And basically, Bob Kanigher, who is the editor and writer at DC, brought Joe Kubert onto Sergeant Rock back in the day. Joe Kubert had fought in Korea. He was a veteran, and so when he sat down, he was drawing from his experiences. They had this character Sergeant Rock, who at the time it was just another character at DC that had never really been fleshed out. And Kanigher and Kubert did so much work on the title in the 60s to flesh out Sergeant Rock, Easy Company, the rest of the fellow team members, and really made it one of the key DC war characters, almost like Nick Fury. And
He's so famous. I mean, you think of DC War, you think of Sergeant Rock.
Right, exactly. So now Joe Kubert is on in years. He's had his career. He's in the twilight of his career, could be said. He doesn't work that much anymore. And DC approached him about doing the covers because they were going to do a Vertigo series, a Sergeant Rock Vertigo series. And he's talking to Karen Berger, who's the editor that runs Vertigo. And the conversation started off, do you want to do the covers? And they kept on talking, and it just ended her saying, well, do you want to draw the book? And Joe Kubert said, well, I haven't done it in years, and it's going to take like a year for me to draw it. And he's like, who would write it? And she just paused and said, Brian Azzarello. And Joe Kubert's like, yes. And so Azzarello, who we know is a great writer from 100 Bullets and all that stuff like that, wrote this fantastic Sergeant Rock story and Joe Kubert spent over a year drawing it. And if you saw Wednesday Comics, you saw it's the same kind of style. Joe Kubert kind of evolved his style to draw it.
It's spare now.
Yeah, very spare, very almost newspaper-like, in terms of it. The art in this book just wowed me. I mean, it was just like very, very clean. And the coloring was perfect. He, in doing the layouts, consciously, because he didn't want to take on too much work and stuff like that, but also because he wanted to keep it simple, he kept the grid to the classic 9-panel grid that we read in Watchmen and that sort of thing. He said, I'm not going to break panel borders. I'm not doing anything fancy.
Nothing innovative.
Exactly. I'm just going to tell the story. And he breaks the 9-panel grid. He does some interesting layouts, but it's always boxes and very straight.
Combination of those 9 panels.
Exactly, and it shows how strong of a storyteller he is.
I should hope so.
Yeah, exactly. The story is a simple story. It's in 1944 in Europe in the.
That's during World War II.
Yes, World War II. Yes, I'm sorry. 1944 during World War II in the forest. You know all those forest campaigns where they were trying to march on Berlin and they were trying to get forward, and it's winter and it's cold.
Bastogne? Is it Bastogne?
No, it's not Bastogne. No,
The Hurtgen Forest?
I forget the name of it, but it might be. Yes, actually, I think it is. And Azzarello peppered in between every chapter, there's a little paragraph writing about what was going on in the war to give you the kind of setting. Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, they capture some German intelligence officers, and shit happens, and 3 of the intelligence officers they find dead, and one of them ran off. And so then now there's suspicion as to who in Easy Company killed them. And there's a lot of discussion as to why are they keeping us prisoners? We're here to fight a war. Is it cold-blooded murder when you're a prisoner? There's a lot of that. And it's believed that somebody said, enough of these Germans and shot them. And so it's kind of a who do you trust kind of story, which I think is really fascinating in that kind of World War II environment, because all you're thinking about is killing one another. But then to stop and pause and question, is it right to kill? And all,
To me, the most interesting thing is the combination of Azzarello and Kubert, because that's totally different eras and styles. When I think of Kubert's an old school, golden age, silver age. In my head, he's an old school guy, and Azzarello's like super modern and dark and gritty, and his comics are profane and very. It's just interesting that they worked so well together.
Yeah, and Azzarello, it was really great. I mean, I haven't read as much of Azzarello stuff as you guys have, but what I have read, I've liked, and he was able to keep the characterizations of of Sergeant Rock and Easy Company and the main guys, the guy with the mustache and Bulldozer, the guy with the big chin. And,
was it all like the Indian guy and everything?
Yeah, it was all of Easy Company. They're all there, and they introduced some other characters, and there were these great little character moments, like they get a whole bunch of new kind of recruits just assigned to them, and the Easy Company's all pissed because they don't like outsiders and
replacements.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a great scene where Sergeant Rock is giving out nicknames, and he calls one guy because there was a skirmish and one guy saved them, and so he starts calling him Tin or Tinny. And he's like, why are you calling me Tin? He's like, well, you came in like Rin Tin Tin and saved us all, and so like he's calling one guy, there's a lot of examination of the nicknames and things like that, and what you figure from war, actually in the book they say, in the ilk of Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, but I would actually say more recently, if you saw Inglourious Bastards, you would like this book because it's very similar at least in the time period, and in Europe with the German officers and that sort of thing, and not as extreme at the end as Inglourious Bastards, but
are the actual soldiers in it at all? Because they weren't in the movie all that much.
Oh yes, there are. Yeah, it all takes place in soldiers. See, but it was great, and I'm not a big war story guy, but I couldn't put it down, so it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like a good one. There's a Sergeant Rock book that came out last year. Billy Tucci one, which was also very good.
Yeah.
This is the show where Connor and I say things at the same time. We haven't planned it.
So Sergeant Rock, Brian Azzarello, Joe Kubert. You can get it at hardcover. It was beautiful, so check it out. We're going to take a break. We come back. We'll hear about Connor's book.
Thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring this episode of iFanboy. Get reliable, secure web hosting without the long-term contract. GoDaddy's hosting plans are bigger and better than ever with 99% uptime, free 24/7 support, and no annual commitment. Check out revision3.com/GoDaddy for all of the amazing GoDaddy deals and codes from Revision 3. And sign up now, use coupon code FAN8, and get 10% off your entire order.
In the last Vault show, I think it was the last Vault show, we talked about battlefields, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Garth Ennis' new series of minis from Dynamite about the World War II. And that's sort of a sequel to War Stories. This is the original bunch of minis that Garth, not even minis, they were one-shots, we'll get to that in a second. That Garth Ennis did for Vertigo in the early part of the decade, in 2000, I think it was 2001.
Vertigo really went on a war kick earlier, didn't they? I mean,
Unfortunately,
they were still riding high off the preacher money. They were like, okay, do what you want.
Unfortunately, they didn't sell.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, Garth Ennis managed to get about 6 of these out. There's 2 volumes. This is the first volume. It's big. It's like 220 plus pages, and this is the first.
Thick.
It is thick, and it's the first 3, I believe, the first 3 1, 2, 3, 4. The first 4 stories. There were 60-ish page one-shots that came out. You remember, you bought those, didn't you?
Yeah, oh yeah, everyone.
I think a couple of them pick of the week, which you would never be able to find because they're in the dead portion of the iFanboy.com. These actually, I think, better than the Dynamite stories, which we like a lot.
With the exception of Peter Snaberg, I think they're all stronger artists.
Well, this is a murderer's row of artists. You got Chris Weston, Gary Erskine, Dave Gibbons, and David Lloyd. David Lloyd did V for Vendetta. Dave Gibbons, of course, did Watchmen. Weston
he did Ministry of Space with Warren Ellis, and he's just awesome.
And Erskine did Dan Dare, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
I like Erskine.
They're all old school sort of
British
80s.
Chris Weston's great.
Yeah.
So Eli.
You just look through this book, and it's just these famously good British artists, and so from that standpoint, the art's better. But I think the stories are better.
There were a lot of war comics out of Britain too over the years. I mean, they had much as we'd had.
Well,
so
it was a little closer to home for them.
Right? Yeah, no, exactly. No, but I mean, there's a legacy of British war stories.
And we've talked about this before, but Garth Ennis loves war comics. He's very fascinated by World War II, and
he talked to him. He said it was like his favorite.
That's his favorite thing to do.
Yeah, this was his favorite series he wrote up to that point, and we interviewed him. He's a war buff. There's a lot of research. It's really a sequel to the stuff now. It's just like those series. They're all based on real either events or people. There's an Easy Company story in here that's nothing like the real Easy Company. Like in this story, there's only 4 original members left, which we know. Right. But he acknowledges that this is for the story purposes. And the difference here is almost like you took all 3 of those minis and just put them out as one.
Right.
But he's doing that. That's basically what you have now.
It's very economical.
Yeah. So there's a story about a German tank crew who want to surrender, but to the Americans, not to the Russians, and so they're trying to get away from the Russian front to the American front. And
good call.
Yeah. And then there's a story about Easy Companies. They have to find a house for their general to live in. This is towards the end of the war, and they find the house and decide they're going to stay in it for a couple of days, and they drink and party, and they find some German girls, and then it all goes bad. And then
every time.
Not German girls. They find some girls from the area, the Austrian girls, and then
Austrian girls.
And then
stay away from them.
And then one of them ends up running naked through a minefield, and that's a problem. And then, although that's all mostly a hopeful story, they don't. It's just it's about guys. It's interspersed with all the shit they've been through. Basically, it's what they've earned.
Are these all World War II stories?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there's a story about a British, which we talked in the past that we never wanted to be pilots in the war.
Yeah.
I changed my mind. I don't want to ever be in a boat in the war. There's a story about.
That's the David Lloyd story.
Yeah, the David Lloyd story about being a ship in the British fleet who escorts supply ships and all the U-boats they have to get to deal with, and how often they just the horrible things that happened to the boats and they were sunk, and it's just that one is terrifying. The David Lloyd art in that is just very moody and dark and shadow heavy.
David Lloyd is the kind of artist that every time I see his work, every single time I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was a D-Day Dodgers story about the guys fighting in Italy, which you forgot. They don't tend to get a lot of press, and that's the whole point of they were called the D-Day Dodgers. They dodged Normandy, which was D-Day, and that's pretty horrific too. They're all pretty horrific because the war was pretty horrific, but they're just fantastically written, researched, drawn especially, and at the end there's a little bit of Ennis writes about each issue he wrote.
That would be really interesting.
He wrote.
So these little vignettes, little war stories.
The little war stories. There's something for everybody. There's a German story, there's a British story, there's an American story, and there's another British story.
Yeah.
So what are these?
But there's no thread tying them all together.
No. They're all just
anthology.
It's like the ones now. They're just we've had 3 totally different stories so far from Dynamite.
Until
or 4
we
from
find
Dynamite.
out that there's a character who's been in all of them.
Right in the background, they just haven't seen.
Johan.
It's like the guy in He-Man. What was that little character that was always in the background? Orko, yeah.
The magician.
Whoa, that's
We always had to find Orko.
Let's
But if you are reading the new stuff now from Dynamite, you should definitely go back and look for these war stories. They came out in 2001. He actually was inspired by Band of Brothers and Saved by Ryan. They came out right after that.
It's amazing what those 2 projects did for war projects.
For the modern generation of people knowing about it and connecting it to what had happened in the not too distant past.
You think Tom Brokaw could throw Garth Ennis a bone? Saying.
Tom Brokaw?
He's obsessed with he writes a lot of books about
I thought you meant to say Tom Hanks, and I was like, no.
But there's a second volume, which I have the issues somewhere, but I haven't had this is the first trade I picked up. I'm going to get the second trade. But these are great if you're into that stuff. Josh will really like it.
Got a little more war coming up after this.
Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this episode of iFanboy. Squarespace is a publishing system for anyone looking to build a blog, portfolio, or any kind of website. Squarespace offers uniquely flexible tools for just about anyone. No coding experience required. You can build high-end, complex systems with that same functionality that you will find on some of the highest traffic pages on the web. Squarespace's newly launched Site Importer tool makes things so easy to move over. Here are some things you might need to know. It supports WordPress, Blogger, TypePad, movable type imports. It migrates posts, comments, tags, authors, and media. In fact, the tool will crawl previous sites' posts, grab all media, upload it to Squarespace's S3 backend, and then safely move them back to the new Squarespace site. There are no other import tools out there that do this. Generally, text can easily be moved, but not media. For users with custom domain names moving over, it actually uses the URL structure for their existing site and creates mapping for every single one of their old posts, automatically. This ensures that when you move your domain name over to Squarespace, in most cases, all links to your old posts will work and nothing will break. SEO efforts are also preserved. Users' page ranks will update seamlessly, and the move will have no impact on the SEO status that many have spent a long time building. So when you head over to try out Squarespace, make sure you use promotional code iFanboy and get yourself a great deal with Squarespace.
Last book I want to talk about today is the Nam? Whatever. This was a...
You weren't in the shit.
Yeah, that's true. If you... I guarantee you've probably heard about this book before. It's one of those things that people have talked about for a really long time.
Punisher was in it, right?
No.
He was
Not at the end of the
Yeah,
series, yeah.
I haven't gotten there.
Yeah.
This is one of those legendary series that was put out by Marvel, and it defies all expectation about what it is you expect to come out from Marvel Comics in 1986. This is the February book of the month for iFanboy.com, Connor's pick, and Connor bought it for me. So thank you.
Christmas.
I'll tell you that. Yeah. Because
You're
he
welcome.
knows one thing that I love.
It's Vietnam.
Is Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Quagmires.
He was like, you don't appreciate the past. Take it.
We're going to hear from veterans groups.
One of the really interesting things about this book is right away in the foreword by Larry Hama, who was the editor at the time, he talks about how he put the book together and what he had in mind. And the deal was they wanted to do a book about Vietnam as it really was.
Well, because Larry Hama's a vet, and the
Well,
writer
that wasn't
was a
even
vet.
it. As he says in the foreword, Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief, handed him what was artwork that was supposed to be in G.I. Joe, which was a soldier in the jungle, and he goes, do a comic based on this image.
Well, and had the title over it.
Yeah, said the Nam, and he said, do that. And Larry Hama was a vet, was in Vietnam, and he said, all right, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it for real.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
he wants to do it right. And he found another guy, Doug Murray, who is the writer, who was also another vet. And the idea was they do this in real time. So every month that passes, a month has passed since the last issue in the time of the story.
Right.
And so at the beginning, you meet this private Ed Marks. He's new. He's the very first page, like he's at the airport saying goodbye to his parents. And he's the guy who you kind of follow all the way through it. There's not really a singular story that goes all the way through. There's things that happen.
I talked about a story of survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like a plot. It's just every month they've got to survive the war.
Yep, and you're just sort of following their lives.
And there's a thread with the corruption, and
There is, but it's not really like the kind of
it's not
beginning,
an
middle,
arc.
and end plot
Yes,
arcs like you're used to.
Well, and that's the thing because it's the month in. So when the second issue came out, it was a month later from the first issue, and so so stuff happened that we don't see.
They brought on Michael Golden to do art on it, and for me, this was really the part of it that shone
through.
The thing that I think surprised me the most is I had seen this here and there. I'd even read a few issues, but sort of reading them out of order, out of context, they didn't really hit me the same way, but getting them right here in the right order and knowing sort of what was behind it, really affected me this second time reading it, and I was really stunned by how good it was. Golden, in particular,
Fantastic.
he does this combination of cartoony icons and realism. Like he can draw any weapon or any vehicle or anything, all that technical stuff. And it's funny when you're reading it, you know, like I know all the names of these weapons and things because of G.I. Joe.
Right. Yeah.
The file card, the Browning, and the
And the thing about Michael Golden is that he's one of those names that you hear thrown around now, and it's like, oh, Michael Golden. But like honestly, even personally for me, I never actually read a string of his work until I picked this up and read it as well. And there's a reason why people go, oh, Michael Golden.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't work as much now, but he's great.
The thing that I noticed about it is that if I were to look at a page of it, just on its own, without reading it in the context of the story, it's not that spectacular.
No.
We were talking about David Lloyd. Like I look at anything David Lloyd does, and it blows you away immediately. But going through this and seeing how he actually portrays, it captures the personalities and the faces and sort of the feeling, and then the jungle and the weapons and everything. As you keep going, it gets more impressive, and you realize how good it is. in a different way than something that's sort of obviously stunningly beautiful.
And it struck me because I always when I thought of the Nom, I thought of the G.I. Joe comics that Marvel put out, and Michael Golden's art was more cartoony than those G.I. Joe cartoons.
Some of it,
yes.
The G.I. Joe stuff had a much more darker kind of tone to it. While I was like, oh, this is very comic-y. This is very like 80s kind of.
That's
cartoony.
what it feels like at first.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But then the other thing that's going on is the colors are a little more abstract than you would think.
Yeah.
Like it isn't,
and they redid them for this trade paper collection.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. They're updated colors. But
well, they look good. It's very flat. Doesn't look like a modern book, and I think that serves this artwork very well. And it's just each issue is like a little time in the lives of these guys, and it's sort of a view that I haven't seen a lot of this stuff because it's very much sticking with the soldier and his point of view at that small level.
Well, when you tend to get a Vietnam story in any medium, it tends to have a political angle to it. When this is very non-political.
This is experiential.
Yeah.
It's about these guys who are in the middle of the jungle don't care about the politics back home. They just trying to survive. That's all it's about. You don't really get any. There's no message here. There's no
They're
like
not asking why are we here? Why don't we get out? They're just surviving.
and it's not asking you to revere the characters or to condemn them. It's just saying these are the characters and this is what they have to do to get them survive each day.
And part of it, like, and you mentioned this in your review, what was amazing is that the book
existed at
the
all.
book existed. Like, like given the weight of the Vietnam War.
And it wasn't that long. It was less than 10 years after the war ended.
Yeah,
exactly. It's shocking. Like, I can't imagine a book like this would exist about the Gulf War. Like, even back to '91's Gulf War.
And the fact that the climate of the market was so different than it, because back then they were marketing towards kids.
Yeah.
And you had this book on the shelf in the comic store on the newsstand next to Spider-Man from the company that made Spider-Man. This was, I'm stunned. Not only did it come out, that it lasted for 7 years and for almost around 80 issues of
and it's been out of print for, I mean, like, well, of course forever, but like, so they just started reprinting. This is volume 1, and so Marvel, is going to be.
I hope they release the whole series.
You should buy them.
Or at least until the end when they started to really try to boost sales and they put the Punisher in it, and that was bad.
Transformers.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. But for this one,
but at this point, there's none of that
Thanos
stuff.
shows up with the Infinity Gauntlet, destroys the Viet Cong.
Sort of one other thing that I wanted to touch on is the language in the book. It feels very authentic. It feels like soldiers speaking to each other. They did have to cut out the profanity because of the comics code and everything like that. But besides that, like sort of the jargon and the slang is there, and the sort of nicknames. And
There's a glossary. There's a real long glossary in the back.
Yeah. So it sort of explains what everything is. But you really get into it as you keep going. You start learning these acronyms and what the things are, the slicks, the helicopters, and things like that.
I said in my review is they don't often explain the jargon. You have to use the context to understand it, and then you do eventually you just pick it up. But then if you really have a problem, there's like a 3 or 4 page glossary in the back.
But I really like that kind of writing, where you just pick it up. You don't have to explain everything. I don't want every time somebody says something authentic to find some way to have an exposition to explain what that was. The slicks are coming. Those are helicopters, new guy. Like you don't want that. Yeah. Really, this was really quite powerful and really good. I thought it held up really well. It does feel a little bit like a comic from the '80s, but not in a bad way.
Yeah, no, in a good way.
Yeah, it was good.
Good comics happened in the '80s, believe me.
Really impressive.
Yeah,
I really dug it.
Cool. So here are 3 kind of books about war that you can check out. We got Vietnam, we got World War II, we got World War II. So definitely check them out. Go to iFanboy.com where you can get links to.
World War II wins.
Yeah, yes, they do.
2-1.
That's awful. There are links to go buy these books, and you can comment and say what you thought of them and that sort of thing.
You can. I wasn't even paying attention to what you.
You can go to contact@ifanboy.com.
I zoned out. I went back to the war.
Was it a flashback?
Yeah, sorry about that.
A NAM flashback.
Contact@ifanboy.com.
It's inappropriate.
You can send us an email about these books or whatever topic you want to bother us with.
You can get your communications officer to come over and do like this, and
we will censor all of your emails.
Call 888-FANBOYS, which is 326-2697.
Yes, and go to twitter.com/ifanboy and follow us. So here are all the good comics bits, and here's our you. Or good times. I was in Vietnam. No. I love Noah Wiley.
Did you watch The Librarian?
No, I didn't.
There's 3 of them.
Any of them. They're not good.
They're all John. He's John Carter in them, though, isn't he?
Real bad. Really. Wait, were you and I watching?
Yes.
Yeah,
Bob Newhart.
Oh, we were here last time we shot.
All 3 of us were.
Yeah.
I come here every once in a while without you.
You're like the guy that's retconned into the story. This is when I was there. Were you there?
Great, I'm a retcon. Nice. Awesome.
Was that character Triumph in Justice League? Remember they tried to add him in the Morrison years. The guy he wore yellow. He's in the trades.
I don't remember that.
It was
Rock of Ages?
They tried to say there was this guy who kind of always been around.
Oh, like, you mean the Centuries?
It was very similar.
Anyway, we're done.